Alright, welcome to the Chapter 3 Study Guide Review. I'm going to be going over the study guide today. So make sure you kind of watch and listen at your own pace. Remember, you can always rewind it if I'm going too fast or if you need to review any problems. Alright, so I'm going to start with 1A here. For these problems, there's multiple ways that you can solve these. So I'm going to show you guys how to solve this using integer tiles first. So looking at A, we have -3 here. So go ahead and I'm going to draw my 3 negatives. 2, 3. And remember, when we talk about subtraction, we want to remove. Now we want to remove 7 negatives, right? Our next number is 7. Now, if you look, we don't have 7 negatives to remove. So what I need to do is I need to add 0 pairs. Now remember, you have to always add 0 pairs because otherwise you're changing the amount that you have. By adding 0, I'm keeping it at -3. So far I added 2 0 pairs. You can see I have 5 negatives so far. So I'm going to add another. Now I have 6 negatives. And now I have 7. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to circle my 7 negatives and then show an arrow removing those negatives. And if you look, I have a total of 4 positives left. So my answer would be a +4. Okay? Oh, let me just take off this. Why this is here. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so then going on to B. B, you're starting with 8 positives now. So I'm going to go ahead and use green for my positives. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And remember, with subtraction, we need to remove. So you can see here, I need to remove 5 negatives. Now looking at my picture, I definitely don't have 5 negatives to remove. So I'm going to have to add some 0 pairs. So I'm going to add 1 0 pair, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And notice if I add 5 0 pairs, I have 5 negatives to remove. Okay, and then I just count up what I have. So I have 13 total positives. So 13 would be my final answer. Okay, now going on to C. So C, I'm starting off with 12 negatives now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And since I'm adding, so I'm just adding on to my picture, 6 positives. So remember, you want to line up your negatives and positives, and this just helps to make circling your 0 pairs easier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to go ahead and circle my 0 pairs. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm left with a total of 6 negatives. So my answer would be a -6. Okay. All right, scrolling down here, looking at D. Oh, go ahead and erase that. So D says you're starting off with 12 negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 12 negatives. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And subtraction means you're removing, and you need to remove 6 positives. So looking at my picture, I don't have 6 positives to remove. So I'm going to go ahead and add on my 0 pairs. So I'm going to need a total of 6 0 pairs here, because that will give me 6 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So notice here are my 6 0 pairs. And there's the 6 positives that I can remove. So once I remove those 6 positives, I'm left with a total of 18 negatives. So my answer, oops. So my answer is going to be negative 18. Okay? All right, so another way we can look at this is to think of what we learned about having two negatives next to each other. So going back to A, you can see that I have two negatives next to each other here. So remember, I can take those two negatives and I can turn it to positive, positive. So this expression also can represent negative 3 plus 7 positives. Okay, and you can see if I drew a picture here, I would also get 4 positives left over, right? If you want to use a number line to do this, you can start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, my pen is not working very well today, so I'm trying my best. I'm starting at negative 3. Here's 1, 2, 3. Okay, and adding means I'm going to go to the right 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And notice I end up on, this is 4. So if you want to use a number line, you can to solve these problems as well. Okay? All right, moving down. Okay, so if you notice, B has the same thing. You have two negatives next to each other like this. These turn into positive, positive. I just want to draw a line. Okay, there we go. So this is really the same as 8 plus 5. And we know 8 plus 5 is 13. Okay, and I won't do a number line for this one. So you can see if you start at 8 and then move to the right 5 times, you would end up on 13. Okay. All right, and then let's look at the next one, C. So here you're starting at negative 12. So let me see if I could draw a number line here. And you're adding 6. So I'm just gonna 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So here I'm gonna start at negative 12. So let me count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So here I am. And plus 6 means I'm going to the right 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I just need to count. This is negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, and negative 6. So that's another way you can get your answer. Okay, and then D, same thing. So I'm going to make a slightly bigger one. I'm going to need more negatives. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, that should work. So I'm starting at negative 12, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So here's negative 12. Now minus 6, I'm actually going to the left now, 6 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the final number here is negative 12, negative 13, negative 14, negative 15, negative 16, negative 17, and negative 18 would be your final answer. All right, excellent. All right, moving on to number 2. So you're calculating each of these expressions. So you need to remember to line up your decimals when you are adding. So looking at A, let's do blue. Go ahead and add right next to it. So you have to change it back to my pen. There we go. So you have 34.013. I don't know why it's not working here. Come on. Okay. Okay. All right, and you're adding 0.89. So I'm going to add point, and again, you have to line up your decimals. 89, which is 3. Can I fix this? Not letting me. There we go. That's the best I can do. All right, and if you have an empty space, remember you want to put a 0 to represent that empty space. You don't have to, but it's helpful sometimes just to make sure you're adding correctly. So here on my right hand side I have 3, 9 plus 1 is 10, 8 plus 1 is 9, and the decimal goes in the same spot. And then I'm going to add the rest here. So 4 plus nothing or 0 is 4, 3 plus nothing or 0 is 3. So for A you have 34.903. Okay. Going on to B, same thing. If you're subtracting, you also need to line up your decimal. So 5.8 minus 2.1. I do 8 minus 1 is 7. Decimal goes in the same spot. 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay. Now when you're multiplying decimals, you don't need to line them up. So actually for C, I can just go right at 47 times 0.22. And I just multiply like any 2-digit numbers. So 7 times 2 is 14. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus this 1 here is 9. Then I multiply other way. Remember to put your placeholder. 2 times 7 is 14. 4 times 2 is 8, and then you add that extra 1, and then add it together. All right. And then you get 4, 13, 1034. And then remember, you need to look and see how many decimal places you need, and that's determined by how many decimal places you had in your original problem. So as you can see, I had 2 decimal places, so my answer needs to have 2 decimal places. So my final answer would be 10.34. All right, so let's go into dividing decimals. So first number always goes inside your division sign. So this is 98.05 goes inside. Divided by 0.5. Okay, remember in class we talked about if you're dividing by decimals, very important that you want to change it so that we're not dividing by a decimal, but we're dividing by a whole number. So in order to do that, we're going to have to move the decimal one's place to the right, because that will change it to 5 wholes. And then if we move that decimal point to the right 1 time, we're going to also move the decimal point inside to the right 1 time as well. So what we're dividing by here is 980.5 divided by 5. So now we're ready to divide. So 5 goes into 9 1 time. On the bottom, I'm going to subtract and see what I got left. Oops. All right, minus 5 here. That gives me 4. And then I'm going to keep going. So the next number I have is 8. Oops. So now I have 48. 5 goes into 48 9 times. That will give me 45. Okay, and then subtracting gives me a remainder of 3. My next number is 0. So So now 30, 5 goes into 36 times. And then remember, our decimal point is right here, so it goes directly above in the same spot. So decimal point goes there. And then I'm going to subtract. 5 times 6 is 30, so I subtract and you can see a remainder of 0. But I do have one more number, which is 5, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. 5 goes into 5 one time, so your final answer is 196.1. So I'm very sorry, guys, it's so messy because for some reason it's just really hard to write on my drawing tablet today. I'm not sure what it is exactly, so hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it gets fixed. Oh. Alright, let me just bring that back up. Don't know where that went. Sorry. Just had it open. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to number 3 here. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. Okay, so for this one you want to just draw a diagram of plus and minus signs to solve each one. So starting with A, we have 9 negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and use red for my 9 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Plus 3 positives. So again, I'm going to draw the positives right underneath, and that will help me circle my 0 pairs a little bit easier. Oh, almost drew too many. All right, and then plus 5 more negatives. So I'm going to add 5 negatives to my row of negatives. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and circle my 0 pairs. I have 1, 2, and 3, which brings me to a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 negatives. So my final answer is negative 11. Okay? All right, looking at B, we have 5 parentheses negative 6. Remember, this means that you have 5 groups of negative 6. Or what we can look at this as is 5 times negative 6. Okay, so how we can draw this is we can draw 5 groups of negative 6. Okay, so I'm going to actually draw them in circles first. So I'm going to draw my 5 groups first. Okay, and again, in each group you need 6 negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 6 negatives. In each group. All right, and then you count up how many negatives you have. Or remember, this is multiplication. So if you know what 5 times 6 is, you can see that you have 30, and they are not 30 positives, they are 30 negatives. So your answer would be negative 30. Okay. All right. Moving on, for number 4, you're just stating whether it's associative and commutative, and this was something that we discussed on Tuesday. So remember, associative property deals with parentheses. So anytime you see parentheses moving around, that's associative property. Commutative property is when the numbers are moving around. Okay, so commutative property, the numbers are moving. Associative property, the parentheses are moving. So looking at A, the numbers are still in the same position, right? You see the 3, the 4, the 2 is on the same position on both sides of the equal sign. Now what changed was the parentheses. So for letter A, it's going to be associative, and I'm just going to put an A for associative. B, same thing. You can see the position of the numbers are same on the both sides of the equation sign. The only thing that was different are the parentheses. So since just the parentheses moved, we would say B would also be associative. Okay, C, you can see the 9 and the 5 switch places on the other side of the equal sign. So we can see the numbers have moved, they have changed. So this case, it would be commutative. Okay, same for letter D. On one side you have 60 plus 78. On the other side you have it swapped to 78 plus 60. So this would also be commutative property. All right, then number 5, you're either going to multiply or divide, and then notice I gave you a little bare face, and you could draw in your negative and positive symbols, and that will help you figure out if your answer is going to be negative or if it's going to be positive. So looking at A, you're multiplying 9 times 13. Okay, so you're going to go ahead, 9 times 13 gets you 117. Okay, now since I'm multiplying a positive times a negative, your answer is going to be negative, right? So you're kind of covering up what you're multiplying by, and whatever symbol you're left with, that tells you what sign your answer is going to be. Okay? All right, and then looking at B, same thing. You're going to divide 56 divided by 2, so meaning half of 56, so that is 28. Okay, and we're dividing negative by negative. So we're going to kind of cover the eyes here, and you can see we're left with a positive, so your answer is a positive 28. Okay, for number 6, I'm only going to do, oh sorry, I only have one of each. Okay, perfect. So I know we learned different ways to divide, we learned different ways to add. So I'm just going to show you the most simple way to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with fractions here. So looking at A, what you want to do is to make sure, of course, you need your common denominator. So anytime you're adding, subtracting, we also talked about division needing a common denominator, you need to make sure your denominators are the same, right? So looking at A, our denominators are 7 and 8. They are definitely not the same. Okay, so we have 7 and 8 as our denominators. Now, if you remember, in order to find a common denominator, you can go ahead and look on your multiplication table and see what is the smallest number that they have in common. So looking at A, between 7 and 8, the smallest number that they would have in common would be 56. So that tells me I need to change each of my fractions to 56. Okay, so right now we're just going to kind of leave the 6 wholes alone, and let's just focus on our 2 fractions here. So I'm going to take 1/7, okay, and then I'm going to multiply by my giant 1, okay, and to get a denominator of 56. Okay, so inside of my giant 1 is going to be an 8, because 7 times 8 makes my 56. Okay, and on the top I get 8, right? 1 times 8 is 8. For 7/8, I'm going to go ahead and also change that to a denominator of 56. So 7/8 times my giant 1 equals something over 56. So for this one, inside my giant 1 is going to be a 7, because 8 times 7 is 56. And the top, I also need to put a 7. And then multiply across, 7 times 7, 49. Okay, and then once I have a common denominator, now I can just take the numerators and add them. So I'm going to add 8 plus 49, okay, and that would give me 57. So 57 over 56 would be my 2 fractions added together. And what I like to do is after I've added the two fractions, I'll add the two whole numbers. So for letter A, the only whole number you have is 6. So 6 would be your whole number. So your final answer would be 6 and 57 over 56. Now if I asked you to simplify, of course you would need to simplify, right? In this case you don't need to simplify, but if you wanted to, you can see 56 goes into 57 one time, so we actually have 7 wholes here, right? And 1 over 56 left. Okay. All right, letter B is the same idea, so I'm actually not going to do letter B, but for letter B you would have to also change the denominator, but instead of adding it like we did on letter A, you would just subtract it. Okay. Let's go to C. So C, when we multiply fractions, we do need to make sure each of our numbers are as a fraction or a fraction greater than 1. So if you look at 5 and 5, 6, this is a mixed number. It is not a fraction greater than 1 or a regular fraction, right? So we need to change it. So we need to change it to a fraction greater than 1, or as most of you know it, an improper fraction. Right? So we take our whole number, which is 5, multiply it by our denominator, which in this case is 6, and then from there we get 30, right? And we take 30 and add it to whatever our numerator is, so that's 5. So 5 and 5, 6 as a fraction greater than 1 would be 35 over 6. Now once I have both of them as fractions, again, with multiplying fractions, you don't need a common denominator. So I've seen this, a lot of you guys decide to change the denominators. It's not wrong, you can change the denominators and then multiply, but that's just an extra step that is not necessary. So at this point, I can already multiply. So I can just multiply across. So 35 times 8 gives you 280. Okay, and then the 6 times 9 gives you 54, so 280 over 54. Okay, and that's it. For letter D, I'm going to show you guys how to divide when you have the common denominator. Okay, I prefer that method the most, so I'm going to show you guys that one. But if you are curious as to how to divide using the other methods, feel free to ask and I'll be happy to show you. So I'm going to first take each of my mixed numbers, and remember we need to change it to our fraction greater than 1. So we're going to do 7 times 5, that's 35, 35 plus our 4 gives you 39. So 39 over 5 divided by, and then now I'm going to change my second mixed number, so 3 times 9, 27, 27 plus 8 gives me 35 over our 9. Okay, so once we've changed each of these to a fraction, now we're going to have to change them so they have the same denominator. So looking at my two denominators of 5 and 9, I know my common denominator would be 45. So I'm going to take each of my fractions and I'm going to change the denominator to 45. So I'm going to go ahead and just set up my fraction conversion. All right. So in this case, for the top one, 45 is our denominator. Let me add that in. Okay, so for the top one, 5 times 9 makes 45, so inside my giant 1 would be 9 over 9. And I'm going to do 39 times 9, which is 351. Okay, and then on the bottom we have 9 times 5 makes 45, so 5 over 5 is my giant 1. And then multiply across, 35 times 5 is 175. Okay, and then once we have a common denominator, now we take the numerators and we're going to rewrite them as our new fraction. That would be our answer. So in this case, 300, oh, I should not use yellow. Okay, so our final answer would be 351. Now 351 would be on the top because this was from our 39/5, so that one always goes on top first, right? And then on the bottom would be our second denominator, which is, second numerator, which is 175. So our final fraction would be 351 over 175. Okay. All right, so number 7 deals with your order of operations, so make sure you remember your order of operation. I also put on the study guide, just kind of as a little guidance, you guys have learned it as PEMDAS. So remember, your parentheses are first, then your exponents are next. Okay, and then you have multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. Okay, so looking at 7, we're going to go ahead and solve it using our order of operations. Now what's helpful is kind of circle what you need to do first. So in this case, multiplication is before addition, so I know I have to do my 12 times 8 first. So 12 times 8 makes 96, so I'm going to go ahead and write 96 right below it. Then I'm going to write the rest of my expression, so that's plus 23. Okay. And then 96 plus 23, okay, gets you 119. So my answer here would be C, 119. Okay. Then moving down, so number 8 is the same thing. So when I say simplify, remember that means we are solving it. Now, if you look at letter A, you have addition, you also have subtraction, and then you have addition again. So remember we discussed in class, even though it does say addition and then subtraction when you write out your PEMDAS, it goes in any order. So whatever comes first, going from left to right, that's what you're going to do first. So letter A just happens to be addition first, so we are going to do addition first. Okay, so I like to do mine step by step. So I like to just draw like a little caret to show I'm doing that section first. So 25 plus 2 gives you 27. And then I like to make sure I write down the rest of my expression so I don't forget any numbers here. Okay, so you see we have subtraction and addition next. So it doesn't mean I do addition. Here subtraction comes first, moving from left to right. So I have to do 27 minus 18 first, okay, which in this case would be 9. And then I'm going to do my 9 plus 9, okay, which gives you a final answer of 18. All right, letter B. So notice you have addition and multiplication. Multiplication comes first, so we're going to do the 7 times 4, which is 28. Then go ahead and add it to your 142. So then here you have 142 plus 28, and that gives you 170. Okay, so for diamond problems always follow the same pattern. So you always multiply to get the top number, and you add to get the bottom number of your diamond problem. So looking at A, you have to think of first, well, what numbers multiply to make negative 10? So we know 5 times 2 makes 10. Okay, but since it's a negative 10, remember negative times positive makes a negative. So one of these numbers has to be negative. So our options are negative 5 times 2 or a positive 5 times a negative 2. So of course there's other ways to get negative 10, right? We could do negative 10 times 1, or even a positive 10 times a negative 1. Okay, but we need to look at these numbers and see, well, which ones would add to make a positive 3, because that's what we need on the bottom of our diamond problem. Now you can already see 10 plus a negative 1 cannot work because that gives us 9, right? So you kind of just go through your options and see which ones would work. Negative 10 plus 1, well, that gives me a negative 9. That doesn't work, right? Let's look at the top one. Negative 5 plus 2. That gives me a negative 3. That doesn't work. So the only one left here would be our 5 and negative 2. And we can see, well, yes, 5 plus negative 2 does give me a positive 3. So in my first diamond problem would be 5 and negative 2. Okay, so B, you kind of want to do the same thing. So here you have to figure out what's in the right-hand side first before you figure out what goes on the bottom, right? So we need to think of negative half times what gives you 6. So in this case, negative 0.5 or negative half, negative times a negative is what's going to give us a positive 6. So you have to think of half of what makes 6? Well, half of 12 makes 6. So in our right-hand side has to be a negative 12. Now again, on the bottom of my diamond, I need to add the two numbers together. Again, we're adding two negatives together, so we're just combining negatives together. So what we're really doing is 12 plus 0.5, which is a 12.5. And since they're all negatives, it's a negative 12.5. All right. Okay, so let's move on to our last section here, which is filling out this table. So if you're given a fraction, you need the decimal, you need the percent. If you're given a decimal, you need the fraction, percent. If you have the percent, decimal, and fraction, and so on forth. Okay, so looking at the first one, you have 2/3. Now, with fraction, you want to change it to a decimal first. Now, to change it to a decimal, remember we need to divide. Okay, so here I'm going to divide. Oops. There we go. I'm going to divide 2 divided by 3. Now remember, the numerator always goes inside, denominator goes outside. So we're doing 2 divided by 3. 3 does not go into 2, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a 0. And now I have to change it to a decimal. Now remember, you can't just add a 0, because 20 is not the same as 2. So this is really 2.0. Okay? And oh, maybe I should make that a little bit more noticeable. There we go. So it's 2.0. I remember our decimal goes right above. And now we're looking at 2.0 as 20, because it's really 20 of those tiny 10 pieces. Remember, we take our cheese stick and we split it into 10 pieces. So we have 2 cheese sticks split into 10 pieces. Now you have 20 pieces. Okay, so you have 20 pieces split into 3 groups. You can split those pieces into each group 6 times evenly, right? So 3 times 6 gives you 18. So I've used 18 pieces. And now I'm left with 2. So again, I'm going to take those 2 pieces, cut it up into 10 more pieces. That's where that 0 comes from. And you can see that it is a repeating decimal, right? And we can check it a couple more times just to make sure. Okay, I see another 2. Okay, I see another 20. So you can already see this is a repeating decimal. So 2/3 as a decimal would be 0.6 repeating. Okay, now to write it as a percent, remember a percent is taking the decimal and moving it 2 places to the right. So my decimal point would be here. And in these empty spaces, remember, since it's 6 repeating, it is a bunch of 6s, right? So I can keep drawing, but we know it is a bunch of 6s. So 0.6 repeating as a percent, let me just delete it. Okay, would be 66. Too much. Oh, clicked it too many times, sorry. Okay, would be 66.6, and then you could just say it's repeating percent. Okay, so that's the first one. Okay, the second one, we have the percent. Remember, percent means out of 100. So 23%, sorry, as a fraction would be 23 over 100. And to read this as a fraction, remember this means 23 hundredths. And we know hundredths is 2 decimal places, so we know it's 0.23. All right, 1/5, again, you're going to have to divide to get your decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and divide 1 divided by 5. 5 doesn't go into 1, so I'm going to go ahead and take that 1, cut it into 10 pieces. And now 10 pieces divided into 5 groups. Oh, almost forgot my decimal. Would be 2, right? I could give each group 2 pieces. And then on the bottom, I'm going to subtract, see what I have remaining. In this case, it's just 0.2. I don't have anything left. So 0.2 or 0.2 would be my decimal. Now again, to change it to percent, 2 places to the right. So it would be 20%. Okay. The fourth one here, you have the decimal, which is 0.16. So I can already say this is 16 hundredths because there's 2 decimal places. Okay. And then the percent, 2 places to the right, which would be 16%. Okay. And then our last one here, we have 66%. Now we're going the other way. So we know our decimal point is right after the last 6 there, and now we're going backwards because we want to change it to a decimal. So now we're going to the left 2 spaces. You can see 0.66 would be your decimal. Now again, 2 decimal places, so that tells me it's 66 hundredths, so 66 out of 100. All right, so thank you for watching. Again, if you have any questions, just comment down below and I will try my best to answer them. All right, so study for your test. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much.